You weren't even able to get me pregnant, Eric. Blake did. He's a real man, and the real father of our kid. That's what my wife, Jessica, slurred at me in front of 30 people at Blake's backyard party, margarita in hand, laughing like it was the best joke she'd ever told. My heart didn't break. It detonated. People gasped. Someone dropped their phone. Blake froze. He didn't even try to deny it. His face gave him away instantly. And just like that, my marriage, my best friendship, and my life disintegrated in real time, under string lights and cheap party music. I should have walked away. Instead, I looked Jess dead in the eyes, said nothing, and left the party. I drove home like a madman, tossed every one of her designer bags and shoes into a suitcase, and chucked it in the hallway. She was out of my house, my life, and my soul. Then I grabbed a crowbar and went to Blake's. That's where this story really begins. I don't remember driving to Blake's house. All I know is the steering wheel had fingerprints in it from how hard I was gripping it, and my heartbeat sounded like war drums in my ears. The crowbar sat across the passenger seat, mocking me with every bump in the road. Blake lived only 10 minutes away, but that night, it felt like I crossed dimensions. The last time I pulled into his driveway, I brought pizza and beers. This time, I brought rage. The porch light was on. His car was parked out front. No sign of movement inside, but I didn't hesitate. I walked right up and kicked the door like it owed me money. First hit, it shook. Second, it cracked. Third, boom, it flew open. And there he was. Blake, my best friend, standing in his living room like a deer in headlights, barefoot, wearing a t-shirt and gym shorts, holding a damn bowl of cereal. He dropped the spoon. Milk hit the floor. Eric, man, wait. Too late. I lunged. The crowbar didn't hit him right away. First, I shoved him into the wall so hard a picture frame fell and shattered. He tried to talk, tried to grab my arm, but I wasn't listening. I'd trusted this man with everything. My secrets, my childhood memories, even the goddamn best man speech at my wedding. And he thanked me by sleeping with my wife. Nah. I brought the crowbar up, and this time, he ducked. Smart, but not fast enough. I clipped his shoulder. He screamed and backed off, hands up. It wasn't supposed to happen like that, bro. Bro? He had the audacity to call me that? You're dead to me. I spat. You and that filthy liar. How long? Huh. How long were you two getting off behind my back while I was at work thinking my wife was just tired every night? He didn't answer. His silence said enough. I didn't swing again. Something in me wanted to, but I'm not a murderer. I'm not like him. I dropped the crowbar and backed off, chest heaving, adrenaline crashing through my veins like a storm. She said, "You're the father." Is it true? I asked. His face crumpled. And that's when I knew. Blake didn't nod. He didn't speak. But his eyes dropped, and he just stood there, defeated. That silence hit harder than any punch. I left without another word. Back in the car, I sat gripping the steering wheel, staring at the blood on my knuckles. My whole life had been flipped like a cheap table. Jess had cheated. Blake had betrayed me. And now, I was apparently not the father of the kid I'd been reading bedtime stories to for the past 3 years. I felt numb, empty, like my body was there, but my soul had gone offline. The shock hadn't worn off. The anger hadn't even peaked. It was just quiet, until my phone buzzed. 1, then again, 2, then again, again. 50 texts, all from Jess. Please answer. I didn't mean it. Eric, please. You're scaring me. We need to talk. I stared at the screen, watching the messages pour in, her name lighting up my phone like a curse. Too late, Jess. Way too late. I didn't answer her texts that night, or the next morning. She blew up my phone like it was her full-time job. Calls, messages, even voicemails, each one sounding more desperate than the last. The same woman who stood in front of 30 people and proudly spat out the biggest betrayal of my life was now begging like a stray dog at my doorstep. But I wasn't ready to talk. Not until the fury burned down just enough to keep me from breaking things again. By the time I pulled into our driveway that evening, her car was already there. I didn't even step inside yet, and she came flying out the front door like she'd been waiting behind it for hours. Eric, she cried, tears already streaming. Please, can we talk? She looked like hell. Sweatpants, hoodie, face blotchy, mascara smeared. I almost felt bad for half a second. Almost. I walked past her without saying a word, opened the door, and went inside. Eric, I'm sorry, she said, following behind like a ghost. I didn't mean for it to come out like that at the party. I was drunk. So it's true. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just stood in the living room, staring at the woman I once thought I'd grow old with. Jessica froze. She opened her mouth, closed it again, then finally nodded. Yeah, she whispered. It's true. How long? I asked. My voice was calm, but I could feel my hands clenching into fists behind my back. She hesitated. 6 months. 6 months. I sat down slowly on the edge of the couch, letting that number sink in. That meant the entire time we were trying for a baby, she was already giving herself to someone else. My best friend. I didn't plan it, she rushed out. He was there, and we were both drunk the first time, and then it just kept happening. So it was never just a one-time mistake, I snapped. No, but, Eric, I didn't mean to fall for him. Boom. There it was. The final bullet to the chest. You fell for him, I repeated. While we were married. While I was working 2 jobs to cover your personal trainer course. While I was booking our anniversary trip. I was confused, she said, raising her voice now, the tears turning to fire. You don't know what it's like. You were always tired, distant. Blake made me feel wanted. I stood up slowly, my blood turning ice cold. Wanted, I hissed. You wanted to feel wanted, so you crawled into bed with my best friend and made a child with him? You think that's justification? Her eyes flared. At least he could get me pregnant. There it was again. That twisted, smug venom that had poured from her lips at the party. The same line. The one that stripped me of everything. And she had the nerve to throw it at me again. I walked past her, straight into the bedroom, and pulled the top drawer open. Inside, I found the divorce papers I'd printed months ago, back when we'd had our first major fight about trust. I never used them. I told myself we could work it out. Now I was just grateful they were still there. Sign them, I said, tossing them onto the kitchen table on my way out. You've already signed away everything else that mattered. Jessica stood there frozen, like the devil caught in daylight. But I didn't care anymore. I slammed the door behind me and walked out. Not for air. Not to clear my head. I was heading somewhere specific. To someone who needed to know the truth next. I didn't cry. Not when she admitted it. Not when I walked out. Not when I handed her the divorce papers and told her it was over. But as I drove to the daycare that day, the place where I picked up our daughter every Friday for ice cream runs and bedtime stories, I felt something worse than pain. Dread. Her name is Lily. 3 years old. A little firecracker with my eyes. Or at least, what I thought were my eyes. Suddenly, I wasn't so sure. Everything about her now felt like a question I was afraid to ask. But I had to know. I couldn't keep pretending. When I walked into the daycare, the teacher smiled like usual and said, Lily's just finishing up her snack. She'll be right out. I forced a nod, trying not to let the storm behind my eyes show. She ran out 2 minutes later, arms wide open. Daddy, my chest cracked. I picked her up, held her tight, and tried to swallow the guilt, the confusion, the aching pressure in my head. That weekend, I didn't say anything different. We went for ice cream. We watched cartoons. I helped her paint a dragon with glitter glue. I tucked her in and read her favorite bedtime book, even though my voice cracked halfway through. Then, when she was asleep, I went to the bathroom, opened the drawer, took out her hairbrush, and pulled 2 strands of hair. It was the dirtiest thing I've ever done. But when your wife tells you the daughter you raised might be someone else's, morality becomes a blurred concept. I sent the sample in the next morning. I didn't tell Jess. I didn't tell Blake. I didn't even tell my therapist. Just me and the envelope and a pit in my stomach that didn't go away. 2 weeks later, I got the email. And just like that, the last string holding my sanity snapped. 0% probability of paternity. Not low. Not uncertain. 0. Lily wasn't mine. Not biologically, anyway. I stared at the report like it was written in another language. Reread it. Closed the laptop. Opened it again. Tried to convince myself there had been a lab mistake. Something. Anything. But the truth was staring me in the face. Jessica had lied to me. Again. I thought the cheating was the worst part. I thought sleeping with Blake, mocking me in public, laughing about my useless Johnson. That was the apex of betrayal. No. This was 3 years of kisses, lullabies, scraped knees, and late-night rocking chair hugs, none of it based on blood. And yet, in that same second, I realized something worse. I still loved that little girl. Biology didn't erase bedtime stories. It didn't delete the way she looked at me when I came home from work. It didn't unpaint the glitter dragon. So now I had to decide. Do I walk away? Or do I stay in a child's life? Even if the woman who gave birth to her destroyed mine? I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the floor of the living room, lights off, just replaying everything like a broken movie. I'd already lost my wife. I'd already lost my best friend. But losing Lily? That would finish me. I didn't tell her about the DNA results right away. That was the old me, the honest one, the idiot who thought the truth always set you free. Now, I was playing a different game. The day after I got the results, I called Jessica and asked to meet. Public place, neutral territory, a little cafe downtown with cameras, witnesses, and coffee so bitter it matched my mood. She showed up wearing makeup like it could erase everything she'd done. Tight jeans, cropped jacket, fake confidence. "You look like crap," she said, sliding into the booth. "You look like a woman who just realized she married the wrong man. Twice." She rolled her eyes. "Can we stop the dramatics, Eric? I don't want this to get uglier than it already is." I took a slow sip of coffee, burned my tongue, didn't flinch. That's interesting coming from someone who turned my life into a public humiliation. She leaned in. "I'm trying to be civil. You've had time to calm down. We can co-parent like adults." There it was. Co-parent. The word hit me like a slap. She still thought I didn't know. I forced a smile and nodded. "You're right. I think we should do this the smart way. No courts. No lawyers." She blinked, surprised. "Really?" "Yeah," I said, reaching into my jacket pocket. I pulled out a manila envelope and slid it across the table. "But first, we agree on some terms." She opened it. Inside, a drafted custody agreement. One that gave me full weekends, holidays, and alternate weeks. On paper, it looked generous. Balanced. To someone who didn't know what I knew. "This is a lot," she muttered. "You think I'm a bad dad?" I asked. "Be honest." She hesitated. "No, you're a great dad. You always were." "Then sign it." She looked at me for a long moment, then slowly nodded. I watched her pull the pen from her purse and scribble her name without reading the fine print. Good, because hidden in that agreement was a clause I added, one that would matter when the Real fight started. A clause that stated I was accepting temporary custodial rights until parentage was legally clarified. Meaning, she just gave me partial custody of a child that's not mine. That paper was my weapon now. She finished signing and slid the papers back. "See? We can be reasonable," she smiled, trying to act proud of herself. "We're doing what's best for Lily." I nodded again. "You're right. She deserves stability." What she didn't know was that I had already contacted a lawyer. A brilliant one. And with the DNA results and her signed agreement, I now had enough leverage to rip the rug from under her feet in court. She walked out of that cafe thinking she'd just won. She didn't know the war had started. Later that night, I picked Lily up like usual. She came running into my arms, all giggles and glitter sneakers. I strapped her into the car seat, kissed her forehead, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. She wasn't my blood, but she was my heart. And I'd be damned if I let Jessica ruin that too. Back home, Lily was asleep in minutes. I stood by her door, watching her tiny chest rise and fall, wondering how something so pure came from someone so toxic. Then I texted my lawyer. She signed. Let's go to war. The first court date was set within 3 weeks. Family court. Small room. Beige walls. Quiet. Civil cold. But beneath that silence, war drums were beating. Jessica came in with her usual smug look, dressed like she was on her way to a brunch in Beverly Hills. All white blazer and crocodile purse, like she thought appearance could outshine reality. She didn't know what I had in my back pocket. Not yet. My lawyer, Daryl Collins, a 40-something man built like a wolf in a tailored suit, leaned toward me and whispered, "She's smiling now. Watch how fast that changes." He wasn't wrong. The judge opened the session, asked us to clarify custody terms, and then asked if any new evidence had been submitted. That was my cue. Daryl stood up, smooth as hell, and handed over a sealed envelope. "Your Honor," he said, "this contains the results of a DNA test, voluntarily submitted by my client and the child in question. It proves, definitively, that Mr. Eric Lawson is not the biological father of the child he believed to be his." Jessica's head whipped toward me like she'd been slapped. "You what?" The judge banged the gavel lightly. "Mrs. Lawson, please remain seated." "No, no, no," she stammered, standing up. "That's not legal. He can't just, he never even asked me." I didn't need your permission, I said calmly. You gave me the brush. The evidence was already there. Her jaw clenched. I watched her confidence drain from her face like blood down a sink. And I wasn't done. Daryl kept going. Furthermore, Your Honor, we'd like to bring attention to the custody agreement previously signed by Mrs. Lawson, which acknowledges shared custodial responsibility and temporary assignment of primary parenting time to my client. The judge reviewed the paperwork and nodded. I see that here. Jessica was fuming now, eyes wide, lips twitching. She looked like she was ready to claw my eyes out, but she couldn't. Not here. Not in front of the judge. He's manipulating everything, she barked. This isn't fair. He's not even her real father. Neither is Blake, I cut in. Her mouth slammed shut. Yeah, that's right. I wasn't bluffing. You think I stopped with one DNA test? I said, my voice calm but ice cold. I tested her against Blake too. Guess what? 0% match. Again. She looked like she was going to throw up. The room went dead silent. Even the judge blinked. Jessica sat down slowly. Her whole face collapsed in on itself. She didn't look like a villain anymore. She looked like a fool. A scared little girl in designer heels, finally realizing she'd played too many games and lost track of her own lies. So, you don't even know who the father is, I added, finishing the blow. And for once in her life, Jessica had no comeback. The judge scheduled a follow-up hearing and temporarily granted me full parental rights until a paternity suit could be completed, if Jessica could even name someone to test against, which she couldn't. Outside the courthouse, she caught up to me. No cameras, no judge, just two people whose lives had been set on fire, but only one of us was holding the matches. Why are you doing this? She hissed. You're not her father. No, I said, stepping closer. But I've been more of one than you'll ever deserve to have in her life. And I walked away. No yelling, no threats, just silence, the kind that follows when you know you've already won. It had been a quiet 2 weeks since court, too quiet. Jessica hadn't called, hadn't texted, no drama, no surprise pop-ins. Even the daycare teacher told me she hadn't picked Lily up once since the hearing. It was like she'd just checked out. I should have felt relieved, but something about it made my skin itch. People like Jessica don't go down without a final explosion. She wasn't the type to lick her wounds in silence. She was the type to strike back when no one was looking. And I was right. One Thursday afternoon, I pulled into the driveway after picking Lily up from preschool. She was half asleep in the back seat, clutching her stuffed unicorn. As I cut the engine, I saw a car already parked outside my house. Jessica, standing on the porch, alone. She looked different, not in the I've changed kind of way. More like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was messy, makeup half done, but it wasn't the chaos that caught my attention. It was her hand, pressed over her stomach. She turned as I got out of the car and called out softly, "We need to talk." I walked up slowly, cautious. Not angry, just tired. Unless it's about signing full custody over to me, I've got nothing left to say. She nodded, eyes flicking to Lily asleep in the car. It is. But there's more. Here it comes. She hesitated, took a breath, and said it. I'm pregnant. Silence. Not because I didn't believe her, but because I did. And that terrified me more than anything. I didn't come here to trap you, she added quickly. It's not yours. I know that. I haven't been with you in months. Then what do you want from me? She looked up at me, eyes glistening. Help. I laughed. Loud. Painful. Ugly. You want my help? You blew up my life, turned my best friend into a stranger, tried to pass off a kid that wasn't mine, and now you want me to play hero again. She didn't flinch. I know I was awful. I know I destroyed everything. But I can't do this alone. Then don't get pregnant by random strangers. It wasn't random, she snapped, and there it was, the bite behind her words, the old Jessica. She took another breath, calmed herself. It was someone I was seeing, after Blake. I thought it might be serious. I was wrong. He bailed the second I told him. Shocker. She leaned on the railing, looking older than she had ever looked before. I've lost everything, Eric. My friends, my family, my job. And now I'm about to raise 2 kids alone. I crossed my arms. No, you're not. She blinked, hopeful. You're going to raise 1 kid. The one inside you. Because the other? She's mine now. I let those words sink into her. You had your shot with Lily, and you blew it. I'm not giving you another chance to ruin her. She nodded slowly, eyes glassy. I understand. Good. I turned to go back to the car, But she called after me again. For what it's worth, Eric, you were the best man I ever knew. I just wasn't the kind of woman who deserved you. No, I said over my shoulder. You weren't. And now you'll never be. I got in the car, started the engine. Lily stirred in the back, yawned, and asked if we were going to get pizza. Yeah, I smiled. Extra cheese. As I drove away, Jessica shrank in the rearview mirror. And I didn't look back. People ask me now, how did you survive it? And honestly, I don't even know how to answer that. Because survival doesn't look like a movie. It's not some big dramatic moment where you scream into the wind and suddenly heal. It's waking up at 3 a.m. from dreams where everything is still intact. It's brushing your teeth next to an empty sink and remembering how she used to leave makeup stains in yours. It's telling a child you love her even when you're not sure the world will let you keep her. It's quiet. And it's brutal. But it's real. Jessica and I haven't spoken since that night on the porch. I haven't checked in. Haven't asked about her pregnancy. Haven't responded to the 2 emails she sent after court trying to sound civil again. I'm done being the nice guy who gets crushed because he believes the best in people who show him the worst. Lily's still with me. Full custody came faster than expected. Her disappearance from daycare, her failure to attend follow-ups, and the final nail. She didn't even show up for the last court hearing. The judge called it abandonment. I called it a blessing. Lily still calls me daddy. And yeah, there's this dark thought that creeps in sometimes. This voice that says, she's not yours. But that voice gets quieter every time she smiles at me, every time she falls asleep with her hand wrapped around my finger. She may not carry my blood, but she carries my name. And I'll protect her until the day I stop breathing. I've rebuilt, slowly. Got a new apartment. Smaller, quieter, no ghost in the bed. Started going back to the gym. Took up boxing again. There's something healing about hitting a heavy bag when the world's tried to beat the life out of you. Therapy? Yeah. I finally stopped pretending I was fine. Sat on a couch, looked a stranger in the eye, and said, my wife cheated on me with my best friend, lied about our kid, and tried to ruin me. And for the first time in months, I heard myself say it without shaking. So what did I learn? I learned that the people closest to you can destroy you the fastest. I learned that silence is powerful, especially when you use it to watch someone dig their own grave. I learned that love isn't about DNA. It's about who stays when everything else burns down. But most importantly, I learned never to ignore your gut. I saw the signs with Jessica. The late nights. The weird lies. The sudden distance. I convinced myself it was just a phase. That if I worked harder, loved louder, things would fix themselves. They didn't. They broke. And I almost did too. But I didn't. So to the guy out there right now, reading this, maybe lying awake beside someone who feels like a stranger, listen to me. You're not crazy. You're not weak for being hurt. You're not less of a man for loving the wrong woman. But you will be a fool if you let her break you and call it love. Walk away if you need to. Fight back if you must. But whatever you do, don't stay silent. You'll heal. You'll rebuild. And one day, you'll look back on the ashes of what she burned, and you'll realize you didn't lose her. She lost you.